All right, all right, all right, all right. Here we go. Beyond the fundamentals, we are live. And good thing is, the boring and dull part of your day is now over. Here we are, Beyond the Fundamentals, come to save the day. Now, we have, as we're getting started here, I want to say hi to everybody that's in the chat. Got Forging Beyond the Belief showing up. Looks like he's on a roller coaster. Got Roddy and Richard and Julia. Lovely evening to you too. We have shirts here, and we have conversation starter shirts that you can wear. You can actually put this shirt on your body, and it looks like that. I have some of these right here. These are great conversation starters. All they say is say no to Brother Melms, and they have the website on the back. Say no to Brother Melms, right? And when you wear this shirt, people are going to ask you, what on earth does that mean? And now you are in a conversation. And you can talk about what it means to not outsource your sense making to some detestable old fool who doesn't even know what's good for himself. So we have that available. The links to get those are in the description of this video. If you just scroll down to the description, there will be a link there where you can get these yourself. Now I get all scared sometimes that what if it isn't there? But I just double checked and it's there. So we're talking, by the way, if people want to support the channel, you want to donate and support the channel, we very much appreciate that. And you can do so at PayPal and at Venmo, Kevin-Thompson-418 at Venmo, and Kevin at BeyondTheFundamentals.com at PayPal. And sometimes people don't like Venmo or PayPal, and shoot me an email. We'll work something out. But we totally do all of this based on people like you supporting what we do. It takes time, space, resources, money to produce this kind of content. We're not following the party line of any other thing. And this is all original content here designed to help you transform into the most Christ-like person you can be this side of death. Somebody said, who is Brother Melms? And that makes me curious, because this came up at work the other day. And somebody... Oh, there's something wrong with the embed link being invalid or something like that. I don't know what's up with that. So, Brother Melms, I think if you Google Brother Melms... Huh. Who is Brother Melms? I don't know. Somebody Googled it and read it back to me at work the other day. But Brother Melms is the fictitious character to whom people outsource their sense making. Yeah. He is the... Hey, Keith. Good to see you, too. Brother Melms is the person to whom the Christians outsource their sense making. He gets to call all the shots for you. Front row better than your church brother. We want to talk about today a concept, new wine in old bottles, and this is a concept that has been brewing with me for quite a while, and I'm right at the edge of my cognitive ability to formulate this idea and to deliver it to you. And I'm not exactly sure how this is going to go, but we're gonna give it a go, and we got some feedback coming in from the chat here. So if you guys have questions as we go, somebody said live long and prosper. There we go. A mascot representing those ideologically possessed. Yes, he's the mascot of the ideologically possessed. That's a great way to phrase that. That's great. So new wine in old bottles, right? Well, this phrase. We're going to talk about transformation today. This phrase comes from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And the disciples of John came to Jesus saying, why do we and the Pharisees fast often, but thy disciples fast not? And Jesus said unto them, can the children of the bride chamber mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come when the bridegroom shall be taken from them, and then they shall fast. Now this is very interesting stuff that he says here. No man putteth a piece of new cloth unto an old garment, for that which is put in to fill it up taketh from the garment, and the rent is made worse. In other words, it looks worse than when you started. I think people are commenting on my Star Trek mug here. This live long and prosper stuff. Neither do men put new wine into old bottles, or else the bottles break, and the wine runneth out, and the bottles perish. But they put new wine into new bottles, and both are preserved. Now, bear in mind, we're not talking about glass bottles like we use today. We're talking about bottles that are made out of wine skins. Okay? Bottles that are made out of wine skins, or animal skins. Okay? So some translations of the Bible will say wine skins instead of bottles. There was somebody who was arguing with me one time. I visited a church, and then the pastor saw that I had a King James Bible, and he wanted to give me a bunch of anti-King James arguments. And he's even carried out over email and everything else. And I wasn't really into that kind of thing. But I said, okay, and he said, well, look, I'll give you an example. Over here, it says bottles, but it should say wine skins. Or it should say skins, is what he said. I said, yeah, but didn't they use the skins to make bottles with them? How would they know that they were bottles and not like a coat? And the guy just got mad and stopped talking to me. I think that kind of stuff is funny. Over here, a very similar thing. The disciples of John and of the Pharisees used to fast, and they came and say unto him, why do the disciples of John and the Pharisees fast, but thy disciples fast not? And Jesus said unto them, can the children, and he goes on and says something very, very similar. No man putteth new wine into old bottles, else the new wine doth burst the bottles, and the wine is spilled, and the bottles will be marred. But new wine must be put into new bottles. Okay, there's something about a container that I want to talk about while we're here. Interestingly, in Luke, it's a little bit different here. And Levi made a great feast for him in his own house, and there was a great company of publicans and of others that sat down with him. But their scribes and Pharisees murmured against the disciples, saying, why do you eat and drink with publicans and sinners? And Jesus said unto them, they that are whole need not a physician, but they that are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. And they said unto him, why do the disciples of John fast often and make prayers, and likewise the disciples of the Pharisees, but thine eat and drink? And he said unto them, can you make the children of the bride chamber fast while the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come when the bridegroom shall be taken away from them, and then shall they fast in those days. And he spake a parable unto them, no man putteth a piece of new garment upon old, if otherwise, then both the new maketh a rent, and the piece that was taken out of the new agreeth not with the old. And no man putteth new wine into old bottles, else the new wine will burst the bottles and be spilled, and the bottles shall perish. So the container and the contents will perish if there is a mismatch of the container and the contents. But new wine must be put into new bottles, and both are preserved. No man having drunk old wine, this is interesting because it isn't in the other accounts. No man having drunk old wine straightway desireth new, for he saith the old is better. Isn't that interesting? And it doesn't tell you, he saith the old is better. And it's interesting, is he trying to say that old is better here? Or is he saying that he's going to reject something because people like what they're used to? They like what they're familiar with. The stuff that is old and familiar. Yeah, somebody said they didn't wash their hands either. Somebody gave a brewing pun down here, and I'm trying to catch it. I can't see all the comments and do content at the same time. So this concept of a container, I want to introduce you to this idea. Carl Jung discussed, and I got 3 people up here. I'm hoping one of them will make you mad. Carl Jung discussed the idea that marriage partners could be compared to the contained and the container. Like the more complex marriage partner is the container, and the more simple marriage partner is the contained. That kind of thing. And you can read more about that. You can probably Google it and find it. And then Jordan Peterson furthers this concept into the idea that marriage itself is a container of like a crucible of heat and pressure designed to transform a person for the better. I think that's interesting. Now, Richard Rohr expands on the idea of a container even further, and he demonstrates how many arrangements can be containers for first half of life wisdom. And what kind of arrangements are we talking about? We're talking about your religion, your career, maybe a particular relationship with a particular denomination within Christianity or something like that. It could be a marriage, could be a job, could be your academic career. It could be if you're playing sports, maybe, if you play college football, something like that. And it could be the camaraderie. There's all kinds of things with which you relate that can serve as a transformative container, okay? Now, what our focus is on here is the role of religion and how religion is kind of like it's a game of sorts. It's a game of sorts. And I don't mean that in a light-hearted way, like it's just a game, therefore it's not serious. That's not what I'm saying. But it is a game of sorts. And you need to understand what the goal of the game is, what the desired end state of the game is. When it comes to containers, we did a video here called Chrysalis or Crypt, how in your first half of life, your formative years up through about the age of maybe 35 or so, if you're on schedule, form kind of a cocoon, and it's associated with your ego. And you know what? I think I have another slide deck. I guess that's not important. We don't have to get into all that right now. But it's kind of a, like Leonard Cohen said, the lights get through the cracks. The point of a cocoon is what comes out the other side. While the caterpillar is in the chrysalis, it doesn't really matter. It's not really useful. It's not a butterfly. It's a potential thing, all right? And if you were to get it out too early, it would be ruined, okay? And you don't want to get something out too early and ruin it. So if you were to look at the life cycle of a human, you start off as a baby, and that would be analogous to the caterpillar phase. And then as a young adult, this is analogous to the chrysalis phase or the cocoon phase of a moth, I guess. And this cocoon is the ego. It's comprised of all the things that you think about yourself that are not you, and all the things that you present as being yourself that are not you. Your job, your relationships, your family, your preferences, your likes, your dislikes, your beliefs. Okay? My allergies are really acting up tonight. Your beliefs, all these things, you present these things as yourself, and they are not you. And eventually you climb out of that chrysalis, and ideally one day maybe you would emerge as a sage, or a saint, something like this down here, like the big beautiful butterfly. I might have to take an audio pause here. One of the reasons I have trouble going live is because that kind of thing is happening all the time. So what you want to do this first half of life needs to be ordered, structured. It needs to have integrity. It needs to have some rigidity to it. It needs to have some boundaries. It needs to have some impulse control. These things are very, very essential. Okay. What happens is, when you don't get that in first half of life wisdom when you should, you wind up going off the rails. Some people wind up in jail. Some people wind up all kinds of other ways. And then when you're in jail and people say they found Jesus, really, they've just found the structure, order, discipline, boundaries, and impulse control that they lacked growing up. And then they slap the name Jesus on that. So you typically find people who have come out of harsh ways really sinful lifestyles, they come out with a very fundamentalist, literal type of Christianity, a very rigid, brittle kind of fundamentalist Christianity, which when you're, older than say 35 or so, it's you're putting on pants that are too small. That's something you should have had a while back. And so there is a misalignment with where a person is and where they should be, okay? Now when it comes to wine and grape juice, I'm gonna make some people mad tonight. I can't wait. Can I be a buff dude with chest hair? Wizards scare me. No, you cannot. Allergies in South Carolina were intense last week. Just getting some relief now. That'd be a funny name for a sports mascot if they were the allergies. That's what it sounds like you're saying. Like a sports team name. So we have this passage here. Neither do men put wine into new wine into old bottles, else the bottles break and the new wine runneth out. Now, inevitably, there's going to erupt some kind of conversation about alcohol and beer and drinking and whether or not Christians should drink. I highly encourage you not to get into that debate here or in the chat or in the comments section after this video has already gone live. That's not the point of this. If you ask where I stand on this, I used to have I preached a sermon when I was pastor of Skyline Baptist Church called Spirits in the Temple. And it was giving all the reasons why Christians should not drink. Okay, it's a pretty good play on words, spirits in the temple too. All the reasons why Christians should not drink. I have since taken that down, okay? And we won't talk a whole lot more about that, but I just ask you not to really get into that, not to get into that kind of debate here because that misses the point of what we're trying to say. So let's not get into that debate here. If you look on a bottle of wine, for instance, if you look on a modern day bottle of wine, you'll see something about the container. And this container says bourbon barrel aged. What does that mean? That means, that why do some KJVs say wineskins? I don't know which ones do. That means that the wine was aged in a bourbon barrel. Okay? Why is that important? Because the container that the wine was in makes a difference for the quality of what comes out the other side that can be consumed by other people. Okay? That container is very important. And it's so important that they advertise it like as a good thing. And it even has a picture of a little barrel on there. Okay? So that container, it's very important that the wine goes through its full duration while it's there. And I'm not advertising for any particular wine. I don't even know if I've had this kind before. I've just seen that phrase before and I wanted to be able to display it and show it to you. Okay. Now the next thing I want to show you is you may not be able to tell the difference between these two is if you are into Scotch, there's this Macallan 12 Highland single malt Scotch whiskey, okay? Over on the left, these kind of look the same. And if you're just going to the store to pick something up, you might not be able to tell the difference between the two. But the label at the very top is a different color where it says 12 right up there. And down here, you have, this one is aged in a double cask, okay? Goes from one kind of cask and then into another one. It is aged for 12 years. And this one over here on the right on your right, is aged in a sherry oak cask. This one is aged in a sherry oak cask. Okay? Double versus sherry oak. And this one on the right, on your right, is about $20 more expensive than the one on the left. Why? Because of how it was aged, because of the container that was in, the quality of the container that it was in when it was aging. Okay? So, yeah. So bear that in mind. And our association with religion is like this. It could be a sherry oak cask, and you could come out very refined, or it could be a double cask. Maybe you were a church hopper, and it's still pretty nice, but it's not as expensive as the sherry oak cask one that was single barrel aged in a sherry oak cask. Okay. So I want you to notice some things. I want you to think about a few things. It's important for this particular kind of scotch that it actually is aged for 12 years. Because that's what it is. That's the product, is to age it for 12 years, and it has to be aged in the appropriate container, and the container has to have a good bit of integrity to it. And if the container does not have good integrity to it, whatever's inside will not age well and could spoil or leak out or go away, that kind of thing. So it's very important that the container has structure, order, rigidity, boundaries, firmness, okay? That container must have that. And your first half of life wisdom needs to have some kind of well-defined boundaries, well-defined order, structure, integrity, and boundaries in order to produce what you need to be. Now, you do not want to be a traditional, ordered, rule-following person all your life that way, because that defeats the purpose. Now, the next thing you want to notice is that this stuff cannot be of service while it's still in the container, while it's still in the aging container, in the sherry cask. It's wonderful and beautiful that it's in the sherry cask, but it can't be enjoyed or used until it comes out, okay? Now, we are the same way. We have a container that we're in, and maybe your container was rigid Catholicism or rigid Independent Baptist version of Christianity or Assemblies of God, something like that. The more seriously you take it, okay, the better of a container it is. And when you're ready to come out, now that's the thing that I think a lot of people are going to misunderstand. There comes a time to step out of the rigidity and structure and boundaries of that container. Why? So that you can be used. And a lot of Christians think that lifelong dedication to the container version of Christianity is where they need to stay. They need to stay there their whole life. Like if you listen to J.D. Martin, one of the most virtue-signaling people I've ever known in my life. And I only say that because he's a public figure, okay? Or semi-public, I guess. But we're friends on Facebook, and I'm sure we could get along and have a good conversation. He's been on the channel, so I like to pick on him. But he's all about the rules and order and going to a church where the kids aren't allowed to wear booty shorts and all, having the right music, having the right this, the right that, having all this stuff, dress. And what he's done, I mean, those kinds of things are a good container as long as you step out of it when you have appropriately aged. So if you're on schedule right around 30, 35, maybe 40, hopefully before that, too much after 40 might be too late for you. And then it is time to press on. And, you may not, you see these pictures up here, but hey, we got the real stuff right there. Not that I would ever drink that, but this one is empty though. That's the double cask one, and that is the sherry oak cask one. But notice it is not in the sherry oak cask now. It's in a bottle now. It's ready to be consumed now. It's ready to be used now. But it has to come out of that container. And so for those of you who are still of that rigidity mindset, that rule-following mindset, I have to be King James only, I can only listen to this kind of music, I have to have godly standards, and that kind of rule-following mindset, you can't be used until you come out of that container. But you can't just come out when you're not ready, okay? So I don't want everybody listening to this to just abandon wherever you are in Christianity and walk away. What I want you to do is kind of lay out a scaffolding for your future development and growth coming out. Okay, so what does this look like? One of the major points one of the major points of religion is to simply be a ruse. It is a game. Okay? It's a game designed to take a person to the limits and edges of a worldview and see the insufficiency and absurdity of the worldview from the limits and edges. And then step out of the ruse or the game, having gained a clear vision of what the ruse or the game was hiding all along. You see that religion is a game, and it is hiding something in plain sight. It is in plain sight. And once you are ready, once you have come to the edges and limits of the game, of the ruse, and you see it for what it is, you will also notice that whatever the ruse was hiding, it has been in plain sight the whole time and you couldn't see it. Okay? And that's the point. But how are people to know, Julia asks, that there's more to the first half of life container? I wouldn't have known except for you, Kevin. There aren't enough true elders. That there's more beyond the container. And it's interesting that you would ask that, Julia, because I was just talking to Paula about this, my wife, and there is a way that you can, like Galatians 4:19, there is a midwifing aspect of working with people till Christ be formed in them. But when the person comes to see, like if I'm trying to work with a stage 3 person, I cannot describe or teach them into a higher level, okay? And I'll show you some slides on this. But when they see clearly what the ruse has been hiding clearly in front of them the whole time, they are then at a point where they don't need to be taught. They see, okay? I've written unto you little children because you have seen the Father, all right? So we're going to talk more about this, but that is an excellent question. How do you know where you are? And that's one of the kinds of things that we're trying to help people scaffold out with this. We have, by the way, all the videos that are dealing with Christian growth are in a playlist on the channel called Growth and Transformation, which I highly encourage everybody to check out. Now, a good container is a game of reductio ad absurdum. And what does that mean? It means you reduce it to the absurd. We do this with Calvinism all the time. Now, doing this in an argument is not the same thing as them pursuing it, okay? A good container is a game of reductio ad absurdum where a person is gradually pressed to take a particular set of views or practices ultimately to their absurd end. This is done through things like double binds. And we'll talk about double binds in a second. One of the most famous examples, one of the most commonly used examples of reductio ad absurdum is when people say they believe in a flat earth. And so then what you do is you encourage them, you enable them, you what's the word that I'm looking for? Yeah, you encourage them in this and you help them pursue it. Say, okay, let's go to the edge of the earth. And interesting, I know nobody's ever been to the edge of the earth. Let's go fall off the edge of the earth. Let's go to the edge of the earth and check it out, okay? Let's get on a boat and go check it out. And so obviously that takes a long term and it's expensive, okay? It takes a long time and it's expensive to actually go around the world and try to find the edge of the earth. But first half of life wisdom is kind of like that, to where that's the only way people are going to get it, is by following it to its bitter end. So you encourage them and you enable them to pursue this illusion that they have. And sometimes it's important to do that with Calvinism. So I'll talk about what I recommend doing with Calvinism in a few minutes. And so now I see people getting rivalrous over here. Calvinism is absurd on its face value. I agree with that. And then dispensationalism can be taken to absurdum very quickly. Ice wall. Yeah, that's right. Somebody got the ice wall. Can't go with the ice wall. That's right. Yep. Now, double binds. Double binds. Now, I'm going to quote another heretic here. And this is designed to weed out some more stage 3 people who can't come along. This state of affairs is known technically as the double bind. A person is put in a double bind by a command or request that contains a concealed contradiction. This is a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation which arises constantly in human and especially family relations. Now listen to this. The social double bind game can be phrased in several ways. The first rule of this game is that it's not a game. You see it? Everyone must play. Well, if you must do something, it's not play. See? You must love us. In Christianity, we say, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And then there's an implication that it's something like you have to love God, but you have to do it genuinely, not because you were told to. It's a double bind. How else would I know? You must go on living. Be yourself, but play a consistent and acceptable role. See the double bind there. Control yourself and be natural. Try to be sincere. Well, if you're trying, you're not being sincere. Essentially, this game is a demand for spontaneous behavior of certain kinds. Living, loving, being natural or sincere, all these are spontaneous forms of behavior. They happen of themselves, like digesting food or growing hair. As soon as they are forced, they require that unnatural, contrived, and phony atmosphere which everyone deplores. Weak and scentless like forced flowers, and tasteless like forced fruit. Life and love generate effort, but effort will not generate life and love. Faith in life, in other people, and in oneself is the attitude of allowing the spontaneous to be spontaneous in its own way and in its own time. So this religious game of a double bind, this ruse, this game, religion is full of double binds, and we're going to look at a couple of examples like this. This system or game of absurd double binds forms the container. I meant to say container here, from which a person must emerge on their own, kind of like a chicken has to hatch from its egg. A chick has to hatch from its egg on its own, unaided. Has to emerge from this container on their own if they are to be of any real use. You can't be used while you're still in the container. By definition, if you're a fine wine or a scotch or something like that, you have to come out of the container in order to be used. Alan Watts sounds insane. Yeah, he's got a audio presentation called Out of Your Mind, so that goes right along with that. The scotch must serve the requisite amount of time inside the sherry oak cask before it is ready for use. So you can't come out too early, and you can't be used to your fullest degree while you're still in the cask. Okay? That's why stage 5 is the stage where the capacity to help people. Like when you're 19, 20, everyone has all these ideas about the way the world should be. Okay? But most people in our meaning crisis society are stage 2, stage 3. You might be stage 3 if you're not Christian. If you are Christian, you might still be stage 2. I kind of put 2 and 2 together the other day and figured out that the charismatic movement is essentially stage 2 mysticism. Maybe we'll do a video on that one day. But it must leave, and then you get these 19, 20-year-olds, they have all these ideas about how the world should be, but they're not equipped to do anything about it, typically, until they're much older, okay? Until they get into stage 5, where they have that increased capacity for their bonds of connection to have the influence and the foresight and discipline and wherewithal to do something good without causing unintended consequences and accidentally knocking down load-bearing walls in the meantime. So it must leave the sherry cask before it can be used. And in like manner, these people, and you can see some of them in the chat, you must leave this stage 3 cask before you're ready to be used. Some people think that staying in the cask, staying rigid, ordered, the stage 3 version of religion constitutes faithfulness, and that you have to maintain that for your entire life in order to be considered faithful. But that arena, that rigid stage 3 cask, that container, is merely a proving ground where your wise future self and God are waiting for you to emerge on the other side so that you can be put to use. Okay? You have to emerge from that in order to be put to use. A person or a substance, depending on whether we're using a metaphor or not, who is still in the cask, needs to have a well-sealed cask that functions properly. It needs to be sufficiently robust and watertight. Thus, when dealing with a stage 2 or stage 3 person who is not ready to emerge from the cask, do not try to convince them propositionally of stage 5 perspectives. They cannot see them yet. They can't see them. The proper thing to do for them is to reinforce the order. The reason it says on there is because I originally put double down. That might come across as too strong. But the proper thing to do is reinforce the order, the structure, the rigidity of their cask, because they're not ready to come out of it yet. Emerging too early will make a person weak, cheap, and useless. Imagine a 12-year Scotch coming out at year 7. What are you going to do with that? Lie about it? Okay? Give it away for free? Being in a compromised cask with little integrity that is leaky will produce a rotten product. Some of it will evaporate too. So, when dealing with someone like a Calvinist or a Provisionist, you drive them toward more rigidity with their scriptural authority, their interpretive method, the correctness of their propositions. The way to deal with them is to make sure their cask is secure and has full integrity to it. Make sure the boundaries are strong and rigid. If they are moralistically driven, drive the moralism harder. In other words, you are driving them to where they wake up to the reductio ad absurdum. Reduce it to the absurd. They have to see it reduced to the absurd. You can't point it out for them. Okay? So you turn it up on them. Moralism, by the way, does not go well with epistemic sense-making. Now, on this channel, you should know that, and you point out the moralism in other people. Maybe they're ready for that, maybe they're not. Maybe, if you see that they are a moralistic thinker, you bolster that moralism to the point where they come to realize that it is absurd. So you turn it up on them. You drive the flat earther to the edge of the world. Drive them to the ice wall, however you want to say it. Okay? So when I'm dealing with a Calvinist, they say things like sola scriptura. Okay? Well, when we'll show in a few minutes, the relationship to Scripture changes when you come out of your cask. But when they are in the cask, that rigid sola scriptura, you need to drive it home and double down. Make them prove or have them demonstrate. And try not to do it in a rivalrous way, but just in a questioning way, like, wow, really? And get them to show you how scriptural the thing is, and then do it in such a way where as they're trying to do it, they start to realize how it doesn't quite measure up. And they have to have that, they're going to have that little hintaganta in the back of their head probably for maybe months or years before they ever start to realize it and bring it out of their shadow and into their conscious world where, yeah, I guess I really did believe in double predestination. I guess that really does mean that I'm not believing scripture when I do this. They have to come to see that. They had that little inkling in the back of their mind. And there's ways you kind of dance around the cask that they are in to make sure it is a tightly sealed cask. I was dealing with some stage 3 provisionists the other day, and they're all about free will, all about free will and compatibilism and all this kind of stuff. And I was trying to talk to them about the importance of scriptural authority, how there's really only one argument with a Calvinist. Now, the reason this is important is because if one thing that will help somebody ripen in their cask and get ready to come out is to start to see the separation between moralistic thinking and epistemic thinking, and the difference between experience and metaphysical ontology. They just start to notice the difference between these things, start to categorize them differently in their head, that these things cannot be conflated one for another. If I'm doing an epistemic endeavor, I can't bring moralism into it with ad hominem attacks like James White always does. You have to get people to see these things as separate. So I'm not really going to address the arguments probably directly, but I might try to hint around at the idea that moralistic thinking and epistemic thinking are two completely different things. And you're doing two different exercises. So it's important I don't really have a solid theory formed on this yet, but I think that if someone stays in Calvinism, something like that it doesn't have epistemic rigidity. It's like a sherry oak cask that doesn't have integrity, that's leaky, the contaminants are getting in, okay? That they are fronting themselves with, it seems like they're operating in the arena of epistemics, but they're really holding their position because of influence. You see? And what that does is it creates a cask that they are aging in that is not going to age them well. And they're going to come out rotten. In other words, they might turn cynical. They might come out like Tyler Vela and walk away from the faith completely. They might stay in this compromised container the entire time. They might never leave it, okay? So my theory, my current way I'm looking at this is I think that a person would probably need to come out of Calvinism and then stay stage 3 a little longer to get back in a good container that has integrity to it before they're ready to hatch and come out. Okay? That's just my opinion. I think that would need to happen for that to occur. So you want that container. So if you're dealing with a stage 3 person, what you really want to do is you might be doing container inspection. You want to make sure that container has good integrity to it, that it's solid, it has good boundaries, it is watertight, it is sealed, there aren't any contaminants getting in. You might just want to poke around and dance with the container a little bit while you kind of inspect for little things like that to make sure that this person is in a container that's going to serve them well for when they're ready to come out of it, right? And you want to encourage them to actually use their sense making, exercise their senses to discern both good and evil, that kind of thing. Now I want to take a step, and we want to look at Matthew chapter 5. Might want to look at some of these comments here for just a second. A Calvinist will just put forward proof texts that prove the opposite of what they are trying to put forth. And that's where you do maintenance with them, and you try to batten down the hatches on that container to try to, that's like a leaky container that's going to produce a rotten product, okay? So what you're going to try to do is work with them a little bit to put some stability and rigidity in their stage 3 container so that they can come out and be ready to be used for something rather than just to be thrown away like the salt that had lost its savor. Calvinists are many things, but when you but you get to decide if they are a scapegoat, which in turn serves the purpose of keeping you in a rivalrous, stagnant state rather than a growth state seeking Christ. It's a very interesting comment there. So you don't want to you don't want to use their obvious place of inferiority as an excuse for you to stay that way too. Sound like stages of works. I'm not sure what you mean by that. For the charismatic video, I recommend looking at Joshua Fluke's video of Pentecostals and charismatics. Paints a good picture of how harmful it can be when incorrectly done. I think there's an implication in that comment that it's being correctly done somewhere. They drink too much new wine. That's the complaint of Acts chapter 2. What else do we have here? Come out to what? Well, that's the question. That's the question. There's no scaffolding for what is beyond stage 3 in the typical church, and that's what we're trying to lay out for people here as we get accused of all kinds of heresy and backsliding. Sherry oak cask that never got rotated and sat in the sun the whole time. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, rotate that bad boy. I think we cannot be on the fence about Calvinism. If it's not Christian, we can't pretend it's just Christian. So you're going to have to work with that person and tidy up their container so that it can serve to transform them, because a Calvinist cask, in my opinion, does not transform well because it's not epistemically sound. It doesn't have rigid enough boundaries. It crosses the lines. When does discernment come into practice? All the time. You should be exercising your senses to discern both good and evil all the time, calibrating it and getting better at it as you go. The Antarctic Treaty, and that's a response that grants possible excuse to hold their position. That Antarctic Treaty, I get you every time. Matthew 5, 1 through 10, Jesus says, it says, and seeing the multitudes, he, being Jesus, went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him, and he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, for the sake of time, we're not going to cover the entire Sermon on the Mount. But as we go forward, talking about growth, I have this suspicion and this belief that this, don't you want to see God? What if, what if the rest of the Sermon on the Mount, chapters 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew, is some kind of instruction or prescription for a way to be that will help bring about these Beatitudes? Okay? Is it possible? So when you say, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God, I think what I've always been taught as a Baptist growing up is that you get a pure heart from God because he gives you a heart of flesh instead of a heart of stone. and you get imputed righteousness, and then when you die, you see God. What if you could see God now? You ever think about it in the Bible? You ever saw, Ezekiel saw the wheel, and then Isaiah saw the seraphims. He said, "I am undone." Paul, you say, well, there's Damascus Road experience, but hey, 2 Corinthians 12, caught up to the third heaven. Did it ever occur to you that it might be possible this might not be talking about seeing God at death, but there might be an actual way? What if you could have a beatific vision like that, like the people in Scripture? Okay? What if that was possible? And what if there's a prescription for exactly that found right there in Scripture, right there in the Sermon on the Mount, for example? What if that's the case? And I'm not saying that is the case, but I will say this. And I've always been against experiential theology. But I was doing an exercise one time where I was praying for my enemies, loving those who hate me, praying for those who despitefully use me and persecute me. I was doing an exercise where I was very actively, intentionally doing that, which is found later on in the Sermon on the Mount, later on in chapter 5. And I had, I guess, what could be called a beatific vision. And it completely caught me off guard. Nobody ever told me about it, taught me about it. I was never taught that that was a thing. Okay? Somebody said, watch the Silence movie. That's been on my list of movies to see, and I have not seen it. So it was right around 2019, and this thing happened to me. And I was taking literally what Jesus says later on in chapter 5. So could it be that you could actually, these Beatitudes aren't just platitudinal things for the millennial kingdom or for the afterlife or something like that, but there is this concept. Jesus says, seek after righteousness. Ask, and it shall be opened unto you. Knock, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. All this stuff in the end of chapter 6 and beginning of chapter 7. Very interesting, very interesting. And so Jesus says, think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. Now we're pressing into reductio ad absurdum. You see, I can't just take the container away. I have to press it to its full extent. It has to have firm, solid boundaries. It has to do its job. You see, the law has to do its job. It has to be applied, and it has to produce the thing that it's supposed to produce. All right? And this could happen. You could say that a society could be in a container as well as an individual could be in a container. So I think this is interesting. And to me, now when I read this, I see that this fulfillment, I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. He's going to press that thing through all the way to force people to come to the point of reductio ad absurdum, awareness. Now, the concept of righteousness. I do have a slide where this writing on the right is bigger. Matthew chapter 5, verse 20, for I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. Now it's tempting to think of this in a quantitative way. Like the scribes and the Pharisees have a certain quantity of righteousness, which is obtained by rule following and rigidity and structure, that sort of thing, and that you would have to do more rule following, rigidity, and structure than they do in order to get into the kingdom of heaven. And I don't think that is at all what is being said here. Quite the opposite, as a matter of fact. If you go back to the Beatitudes, it says, "Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled." This is the same kind of righteousness, I think, because verse 20 is in the same context from the same sermon. It's the same kind of righteousness. I do not think that this is rule following, structure, rigidity, don't watch TV, don't go to rated R movies, don't drink, smoke, or chew, run around with those who do, no pants on women, 6-inch rules. I don't think anything like that's going on. Yes, Roger, welcome aboard. You caught me live. What is this righteousness? Okay. And then what we're going to talk about is a qualitative righteousness improvement. Because the kind of righteousness that the scribes and the Pharisees are doing is not righteousness in the sense that of the righteousness that we need to have and live. And there's a woo way to this, which people are not going to get when it comes to this sort of stuff. So when I say righteousness, I'm going to write this word right here, and that is qualitative. And that is very, very important. So I'm not talking about quantitative. I'm not talking about following the rules better, following the rules with more fervor, doing them with more gusto, lusting less frequently, going longer periods without falling off the wagon and having a drink or looking at porn. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff at all, okay? We're talking about a qualitative kind of thing. So this basic rule following and formulaic comparison, like here's the list of things you can and can't do, and then you can compare how a person is living and see if it matches the list. When I was a kid, if I saw a man with long hair, like any longer than a military regulation haircut, I thought they were unsaved. Okay, so when I saw a picture of the Gaither singers, the Southern Baptists, and the dude had hair down past his shoulders, I'm like, how can this dude be a Christian? What on earth is going on here? And that kind of stuff is appropriate for children because they need structure and rigidity in their life and order and discipline and impulse control, and during chronos periods of time. For example, in previous times of history, there were Chronos versus Kairos time. Chronos time is when things happen as you would expect them to in a linear fashion. You grow up, you go to school, you either get a job or you go to college, you got your job and you work it for so many years, then you retire and you have grandkids, you got married back there somewhere. You have grandkids and eventually, you die. I mean, it's like this life cycle that expects to happen. And like this 1950 Leave It to Beaver mentality of how life should be, right? Maybe that's how life should be if you were white. You probably wouldn't like it if you weren't back then. It wouldn't be the good old days. Probably if you were in somebody else's shoes. You never think about the things they didn't show on TV during that time or the stuff you didn't watch, all right? The good old days weren't always the good old days. But when you look at I know people who they basically are modeling their life after their parents' life. They're going to, do this for so long, and then they're just going to turn into a frumpy old person and die off. And they don't have any urge or hunger to exercise that stage 5 desire and capacity to reach out and help people and lift them up into the transformation that's available for them. They're not doing that. They never did that, where they could have and should have. And then the Kairos time is like when society is at such a point where a lot of things can go really right or really wrong, like COVID. A lot of things went really bad, but it's also an opportunity for to re-examine, can we do some things better? For example, did we learn some new ways to conduct education during this time that are good? Or did we learn lessons that maybe we tried some things and they weren't so good? Maybe there's some value in seeing people face to face. So beyond this rule following formulaic kind of stuff, to exceed this, your righteousness, I've broken it down into some components that can help you understand the way I think Jesus is using the word righteousness here. And it has something more to do with genuineness, autonomy, proper orientation, and appropriateness. And I cannot help but recall back to the video that I did on World War Z. Brad Pitt's character was genuinely trying to do some things. And when he stole an RV, nobody thought he was doing wrong. When he walked in behind the counter at the pharmacy with a gun slung over his shoulder, nobody thought he was doing wrong, but you wouldn't do that today, you see? Because today is Chronos time. He was in a Kairos time. Stuff's falling apart. When he was standing on the edge of the building, ready to commit suicide, nobody thought he was wrong for doing that. We think suicide's wrong, but it was appropriate then. When he took a machete and he cut off the soldier's arm. Nobody thinks that was wrong, although if you were to cut off somebody's arm right now, it would be wrong. Something you shouldn't do. So the problem with rule-following righteousness is that it cannot prepare you for those inevitable contingent situation for which no prescription can be written in advance. You cannot tell somebody, here are all the exhaustive scenarios in which it will be appropriate for you to steal an RV. Here are all the scenarios in which it will be appropriate to cut off someone's arm. You cannot do that. So when I talk about stepping out, when I talk about stepping out of the container, okay, I'm talking about stepping out of that Chronos rule-following mindset and realizing, just like Brad Pitt's character in that movie, that you have to make decisions that are appropriate for that moment. There is no rule book to follow. You have to do what's appropriate, and the only way you can do what's appropriate is to have exercised discernment up and calibrated up until that point. And you have to be walking in wisdom, and you have to be in a right relationship with the hierarchy of values. You have to, so it's a heuristic thing. There's not an exact thing. So the Bible can't exactly tell you every single situation that you should or should not do something in. It does not cover all the situations that everybody will ever be in. It tries to cover a lot of them, but it doesn't cover all of them. So when I talk about advancing beyond the Bible, I'm not talking about adding to Scripture. I'm not talking about disobeying Scripture. I'm not talking about contradicting Scripture. I'm talking about having gleaned the wisdom to where maybe you can figure out what to do in the middle of a COVID pandemic, which the Bible doesn't exactly cover verbatim. Or when an entire society decides that it wants to reject the language we've used for hundreds of years for sex and gender. That is not laid out in Scripture. And people who approach that from a moralistic standpoint don't understand the societal and linguistic issues that are at play, where there's a real opportunity for Christians to make some headway here. Real opportunity, and we're blowing it when we say things like, a man's a man and a woman's a woman. When we say things like that, we're blowing a big opportunity. Okay? Because some of those people have rightly pointed out that some societal conventions are simply constructed to a degree And we have to acknowledge that language, as we say here, the 4 kinds of knowing, propositions mean nothing unless everybody who's using them agrees on what they mean in advance. So what's happening is we're coming to a point of disagreement on which propositions point to what realities. That's all that's happened. And the underlying realities might actually be some more common ground there. But this is an opportunity to kind of clear some of this stuff up. And we have to approach it with our heads screwed on straight, not from a moralistic standpoint. Okay? So bear in mind the World War Z mindset. And I don't think World War Z is a zombie apocalypse movie. I think it's using a zombie apocalypse to demonstrate when it's appropriate to break rules. And all the way down to the end of the movie, there's extemporaneous rules that are given, like don't open this door for anyone. And what do? They open the door for them. It's all about when it's right to break rules. And or you could say how to notice when the rules are no longer appropriate for the situation. You could say it that way. So I'm not trying to advocate breaking rules for no reason here. Okay? Yeah, language is a social contract. And then there's language inflation. So much I could say about that issue too. Genuine. The person, I'm saying actor here, not like actor in a movie, but you and me acting. The actor is acting from an earnest and truly virtuous self with zero virtue signaling, like a child dancing when nobody is watching. If you get a child and you see them dancing and they don't know anybody's watching, it's this beautiful, wonderful thing. And then if you tell that same child 10 seconds later, "Oh, we saw you dancing a second ago on the other side of the glass and you couldn't see us because of the reflection, but it was quite a beautiful dance. Would you mind doing that again?" They can't. They can't reproduce what they did when it was genuine. Now it's no longer genuine. Now it's strategized for consumption. It's presented. It's mixed in with the ego, that kind of thing. One of the things about growing up and trying to become a wise person is recapturing that genuineness so that when someone is watching, you really can dance like they're not. You really can behave as if no one's watching to recapture that genuineness. So that kind of thing. So this would be a component of the qualitative righteousness, is that real genuineness. Not this religious, put on a shirt and tie and talk, advertise to everybody that my girls aren't going to wear booty shorts when they go to church, that kind of thing. Not that kind of virtue signaling nonsense. Blech. Barf. That's so, second grade. Wake up. No, I'm talking about real, genuine virtue. And when I say virtue, I'm not talking about rule following. I'm talking about genuineness to self. One of the reasons I love playing volleyball is because, like Paula and I, we play sand volleyball. When we go to the volleyball complex, there's people there, and they are more virtuous than any Christian I've met. Why do I say that? You got people there who are, they got tattoos all over the place. They got piercings. They're cussing every other word, and they are genuinely expressing who and what they are. They are closer to God than any Baptist I've ever met, because a Baptist hasn't reached that part of themselves yet, and these people have. You see? And you have to reach that part of yourself and go through it before you're ever going to find God. And by the way, finding yourself and finding God, the degree to which you do one is the degree to which you can do the other. The less you know yourself, the less you can know God. The fact that these people are attuned to themselves more than the virtue signaling religious people, they are actually closer to God than the religious people. But nobody would ever know that, you see, because we have the wrong idea about what righteousness is. We forget the genuineness component to it. And the religious people, we've stifled everything that's really us into our shadow, and we pretend it's not there, and we put on this pretty moralistic face about, I would never do that. No, I would never do that. You're not genuine. And as long as you're talking that way, you don't have the right kind of righteousness. You got to first be in touch with yourself, as ugly as it is and as real as it is. You got to know what it is. And that is moving toward virtue. And you don't get that. The fact that I want to go to the beach and look at, people of the opposite sex in scantily clad clothing, yeah, you have to admit that. You have to admit that you want to do that. Okay? And to be one, well, that's disgusting. I would never do that. Sorry, you're not there. You're missing it. You're missing the point. You can't see the forest for the trees. Somebody was on the channel the other day, and they're like, I would never cheat on my wife. I would never commit adultery on my wife. And I don't advocate that you do. I don't think it's a good idea for anybody to commit adultery. But that attitude is a virtue signaling attitude. It is not genuine. And that person who says that, there is a time and a place that you would. And you have to come to find that. You have to find that before you can be genuine. You see? You have to know where that is. Then there is... So when I'm talking about virtue, I'm not talking about this fronting of holiness and piousness and how much I pray and wear a suit and don't go to rated R movies. That's not what I'm talking about at all. As a matter of fact, that is one of the worst forms of wickedness that can prevent you from coming to know yourself. You have to know yourself. And the degree to which you know yourself is the degree to which you know God. It is reciprocal opening. Can't just do one. And if you're hiding from your true self if you're using your religion to hide from your true self, you will never find God. I don't care what prayer you prayed. You will never find God. Next one is autonomy. In stage 4 of Fowler and Kohlberg's 6 stages, in stage 4, something happens where the locus of authority is noticeably internalized, and an individual can act appropriately without having rules dictated from outside the self. You can decide what's appropriate action and what is inappropriate action, and you don't need to have a rule book or some set of rules that you learned guiding your actions. Okay? If you think of Brad Pitt's character in World War Z, there was no rule book or set of rules that could have told them how to behave appropriately during that time. It just didn't exist. It wasn't there. So he had to have a centralized, internalized locus of authority to where he could decide what was appropriate to do without getting answers from some external source. And you have to know how to do that even as a Christian. So an internalized locus of authority, some autonomy. The next thing is you have to have orientation. You have to be properly pointed at the right thing. And this has to do with a system of values. A person is aimed at something near the top of the value hierarchy, such as life. I meant to say life, comma, survival, love, charity, exploration, curiosity, ending unnecessary suffering. I cannot spell for anything. Connectedness, that's a valuable thing. Meaning is valuable. The ground of being is valuable. Being in attunement with reality, those are valuable things. So you're oriented towards something. So we're oriented toward don't cause unnecessary suffering, and maybe cutting someone's arm with a machete would produce unnecessary suffering. But if their life has been threatened and you have to cause that harm to save their life, the fact that you value their life is a higher value than don't cause suffering. And it's not unnecessary suffering because they need to have that arm cut off if they're going to live. So that's So now you have a heuristic of values. You are properly oriented to the top of the value hierarchy. You're not cynical, you're not nihilistic, you're not naive, you're not pointed at the right thing for the wrong reasons, okay? And then there is appropriateness, and a lot of these have some overlap in them. Appropriateness is a person generates actions that cannot be prescribed in advance, but are most appropriate for obtaining the values toward which the person is oriented. Stealing, cutting, dismembering, killing, suicide, etc. Those are all bad things, right? But they all may be appropriate as demanded by unpredictable situations. These kinds of actions cannot be prescribed in advance, okay? So the scribes and Pharisees, except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. The scribes and Pharisees could not be Brad Pitt in World War Z. They couldn't do it. They're too busy showing the world that they're following the rules more consistently than everybody else. They're living completely in the ego. And they are the least in touch with themselves and the furthest from God of probably anybody on the planet. Right there, right amidst God's chosen people, right there next to the temple of God. And what are they doing? They're the ones that reject the Messiah. They're the ones. They reject the Messiah. God comes down in the form of human, and what do? They kill him. They kill him. The most religious people, okay? The most virtue-signaling religious people there were. So you have this thing like Paul had. He said, all things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any, okay? So there's really nothing. And look at this list here. Stealing, cutting, dismembering, killing, suicide. There's really nothing off the list of a Christian that a Christian may never ever do. There may become, no matter what you can think of, there may be an appropriate time for it. Are you not going to back down to total relativism of situational ethics? Okay. No, we're not doing that. You're missing the point. You're missing the point. In the Army NCO Creed, says, I will exercise initiative by taking appropriate action in the absence of orders. I will not compromise my integrity nor my moral courage. Okay? What's appropriate action in the absence of orders? As a Christian, what is this? If there's a situation, you say, well, we have orders. We have the Bible. We have the Bible. Of course you do. But you're going to encounter a situation that the Bible does not address specifically. And you need to be walking in the wisdom to act appropriately when that situation comes. When that situation arrives. When it comes. When it arrives. When it shows up. Okay? If you out there have deconstructed and reconstructed your Christianity and you're somewhere hovering around late stage 4, stage 5, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you are stage 3, you have no idea what I'm talking about, and everything that I'm saying sounds frightening or scary or like some kind of, like this guy trying to map it back to situational ethics. There's this moralistic kind of thing here, okay? That's the kind of mindset that we want to get away from, right? So what we've looked at today is we've looked at having this container, okay? This container of the wineskins, which is appropriate, and we looked at how some of these drinks are aged. This is bourbon barrel aged, and some of this Macallan 12 is in a sherry oak cask. And when we're dealing with somebody like that, they need to be... We need to help make sure that those containers have integrity to them. That they are... I keep wanting to say the word integrity over and over again, but I think you get it. So when you're interacting with somebody, you should be doing an assessment of what is appropriate for you to do with them. And it could be to bolster the integrity of their container so that they can ripen properly. If they aren't seeing that which the ruse of religion is hiding in front of them in plain sight the whole time, if they're not seeing that yet, you can't talk them into it. It's not something that can be taught. Okay? They have to see it. They have to see it for themselves. And when they see it for themselves, then they might be ready for a little help, somebody to help nudge them and provide the scaffolding on where to go from there, since our churches don't provide anything past stage 3. But you can't start providing that when they still need to spend a little more time in the cask. They need to stay there for a while. So if I'm dealing with a Calvinist or a Provisionist or something like that, then I'm going to try to intensify and bolster the integrity of their container, of their cask, so that they can age appropriately until they're ready to come step out into righteousness that exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, to where without a rule book they can be genuine, have autonomy, be oriented properly, and act with appropriateness. Okay? Maybe we can make an acronym out of that, something like that. Let's look at a few comments around here. Yeah, every serviceman learns this. Yes. There is no common ground with nihilism. Shoot the bull times meanings is an example. Real life decision, stage 3 response, go home and pray about it or talk to the pastor. Yeah. That's a stage 3 response for sure. Hello, people. I don't watch movies or television, haven't for a very long time, not because I thought it was, I just had no desire to do so relating to your teaching, or rather what you're explaining using those metaphors are difficult. When I was an independent Baptist, the big thing was to not watch TV because TV would contaminate you to think like the world. And if you think about it, like, say you see some sure enough saint. I mean, like a real one, not like these fakers that we got walking around here, but like a sure enough Christian version of like Mr. Miyagi or Yoda or Ip Man or something like that, like a Christian version of that. And you notice that they don't watch TV. And then you would make the mistake of thinking that not watching TV is a formula for turning you into that. And that completely misses the point. That's something like what the independent Baptists have going on. They have some kind of idea of what a holy person looks like, and they notice that those people happen to do certain things, and then they think that mimicking the things they do and don't do will produce the holiness that they exhibited. And that's not it at all. It's like when you optimize for one thing, you're automatically optimizing for not all these other things. Like when I married Paula, I'm deciding not to marry all the other people, right? So when you commit to something, like if I commit to say, if I'm gonna sit on my meditation pad over here and meditate for 30 minutes, guess what? I'm not watching TV during that time, and I'm not playing my guitar during that time. And I'm not putting the bike holders up in the storage garage at that time. I'm not, there's so many things I'm not doing at that time, that when you optimize your life toward becoming your future self that you want to be, there's a lot of things that are going to fall by the wayside that you're just not going to do anymore. And if somebody else comes along and thinks that not doing the things that you aren't doing will produce the kind of person you're becoming, they are insane. They want to argue and trigger people. I look at it as they want to be left alone and defend themselves with stupidity, saying they are broccoli. Either way, they live with themselves. They have to live with themselves. I'm not sure what's going on there. I see it's the AC/DC thing. I'm on the highway to hell. It's quite honest. Good word. The logical implication of that is if I know myself completely, a la Socrates, I am God. Okay. We could talk about that. Some of the people on the beach, not all virtue right here. There you go. Religious people are clones and avatar, haven't discovered their authentic self. Typically, that is exactly the case. Yes, but their whole vocabulary can whittle down to only 5 words. I'm amazed at how much information they can impart with just those 5 words that as a Christian I prefer not to use. I've been there, but like you said, it was a necessary process, and thank God I came out of it for becoming more useful than ever. Yeah, it took quite a thing to get me out of my cask. It was not a fun or pleasant thing that I would recommend or that I would like to do again. Yeah, but we might say if you really know yourself, you'll know you're not God. Situational ethics, that kind of thing. The paranoia. That's the stage 3 paranoia kind of thing that we're dealing with right there. That stage 3, American stage 3ism, because we're in a meaning crisis and we're dominated by the left hemisphere, it is superstition, paranoia, rivalry, fear, anxiety, resentment. Okay? 3 years of theological commentary with Christians on YouTube, and I'm a thorough Pharisee at this point. It will arrive. You might find God's image and likeness once you discover your authentic self. You just might. I have this movie that I made in my head, and I never put it in real life, but I have this movie where Paul, the apostle, before he's saved, he's still Saul. And he is watching Christ get crucified, and he doesn't see the whole thing, but he's in a situation where he sees Christ walk through the room, and he's all bloody and hanging down, that kind of thing, and hair hanging over his face, and just blood everywhere, and he looks right at him. And then you don't think anything of that, except for the intensity of the situation. Then later on, Paul gets saved, and he keeps, nevertheless I live, not I, but Christ liveth in me. And he keeps praying to be more and more like Christ. Not that I have already attained, but I keep pressing as if I might one day attain. I press toward the mark for the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. And he keeps praying, I want to be like Christ, I want to be like Christ, I want to be like Christ. And then when they are taking him to be beheaded, he walks, he's all beat up and everything like that, and he walks by a mirror, and what he sees in the mirror is exactly what he saw when Christ was walking to be crucified. Something like that. And I meditate on that. That has some meaning to me. How about a person caught in a wood chipper? I don't recommend that. And there's some other comments here. Scrolling down, looking at a few of them. I mentioned above, we shared your info with a family member that's still IFB, Calvinist, Baptist, Brighter. And he says, what authority does this Kevin guy have? This Kevin guy does not have any authority. That's what? Doesn't have any authority. Listening to your conscience has your walk in the physical world. I believe you'll do stage 5 and 6 without those men you keep referring to. And then Roddy K said, both. Okay. We're going to end this here. What was that one more? I had one more. In my old church, we were told not to go to movies, but everyone had a zillion channels on cable TV. I always thought that was so hypocritical. And now the way we interact with literature now, the way we interact with movies now, is we see when movies follow the right plot line, you can see the logos in the show. And that's the way I watch it. And so we've done stuff, we've shown it on Home Alone movie, we've done World War Z, we've done one on Black Panther movie. So now, if you look at it from the correct disposition, you can see the way in anything. All right? And thank you too. On that, we're going to end. Remember to support the channel if you can. Remember, we have t-shirts. The link is in the description below. Thanks for watching. May the Lord bless you. And good day.